Okay, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the final part of the conference today. So my name is Andrew Bennett. I've recently worked with the Violence Reduction Partnership, and at the minute I'm doing work around healthy weight, and also doing some work around ACEs and trauma as well in the fullness of time. So I'm delighted to be here today. We've changed the plan a little bit in order to finish as planned on time. So we've got still the three speakers that you see listed here. Jane's going to speak first for about 20 minutes.
Maybe 17.
That's music to my ears, thank you, as a chair. And then also we've got two more speakers that I'll introduce, and they will kind of speak between themselves for about 20 minutes as well. So hopefully we'll then catch up with the time that has just disappears in conferences like this. So thanks for coming and attending this final session. And Jane, please come to the floor.
Okay, hi everybody. My name is Jane Pepper, and I worked for the Merseyside Violence Reduction Partnership as the education lead, and then started as the trauma-informed lead. Started delivering training across Merseyside, and this is the research on the back of that. So moving Merseyside from trauma-aware to trauma-responsive, and it's really about developing all of the levels and systems that change practice. So, unfortunately, trauma is a silent epidemic. It is 70% of the population have experienced at least one trauma. That piece of research is out of 24 countries. So we know that we are dealing with a huge problem as far as it comes to trauma. So yeah, like I said, 24 people. 1 in 6 adults have experienced adverse childhood experiences, and it includes maltreatment, household dysfunction, and exposure to violence. The cost of inaction we've heard from today, listening to Professor Mark Bellis, just looking at 581 billion is the cost. The gap, well, actually, frontline practitioners don't have that neurological understanding that we need for them to react in a different way. What we see in the result is ineffective interventions, re-traumatisation. We've talked about that all day today. We've gone over re-traumatisation and the impact that it can actually have. And burnout, and the need is really to upskill the workforce. So I was tasked with writing a piece that would go out as far as delivery was concerned. And we were the catalyst, Beacon training. So we wanted to do it as 4 sessions, because what I know is that actually the neuroscience tells us we can't learn everything in a day. I know currently the NHS are offering free trauma-informed training. Well, I'm sorry, but I'm afraid 45 minutes training is not going to impact change. Let's be realistic. Let's be honest. It isn't going to have the impact that we want where systems are actually changing practice. A lot of organisations have gone out and said, I want a full day's training. No. I say no because actually it doesn't change practice. What we need is multifaceted, systemic change. We need it across the board, and we need it ongoing. So we did it over 4 sessions. We delivered session 1, which is on brain development, went into all of the nitty-gritty as to how the brain develops, how we create new neuronal connections, how we can impact, support, and change outcomes for people. If we don't train people, they don't know. Then we went into session 2, which is the physiology of dysregulation, looking at actually what's happening within the body when we dysregulate, when we get upset, when we get angry, when we start to get the sympathetic nervous system kicking in, and we lose the ability to produce saliva. Sorry, that's why I needed a drink. So that was covering all the physiology. We also covered sleep on that one, because so many people do not understand the impact of sleep and how this can change the way that we actually function as a human being. Since session 3 covered sensory responses, really sort of looking at the body as a whole. What are those sensory responses telling us, and how can we see that trauma coming out, manifesting as different reactions? There are actually 8 senses that we talk about, not the 5, but I couldn't find a symbol with 8 senses on it. And then session 4, we talk about intergenerational ACEs, trauma and attachment. If we do not think about it from an intergenerational perspective, we are just limiting our understanding of the impact of trauma on the body. We carry potentially 6 generations of trauma. So you're walking around with the trauma of your parents, your grandparents, your great-grandparents, etc., etc. That's what North American indigenous populations tell us. But we proved it in 2017 in our DNA. We're carrying it around. So understanding all of that and then taking on board all of the understanding of attachment, that's those 4 sessions. The scope of the study, we actually looked at 1,017 staff that were trained, and we were looking at post 6 months. So between October 2023 and May 2024, that was the remit. Now, we've gone out to 12,000 now, so it's a slightly bigger remit that we're talking about, and I've just redone all of the data. I'll tell you about that in a second. We had 152 participants who actually matched. I could match the pre-post survey. So I could actually say, yep, they came on that. They did the STSIS assessment beforehand, and they did it afterwards, after the 6 months. So what we found was it was 78.9% female staff female respondees, and we had 21 other. Age, it was predominantly staff in that 40 to 59 category. And cross-sector participation, we had people from education, health, police, and public services. So it was really across the board. We weren't looking at one specific service. I will tell you as well, in that, when we actually looked at the demographics of all of the people who came on the course, the population that was educated above university was actually really high. Those staff who'd done that high level of training. So it's a really high level of training staff that we're actually going out to. The ripple effect, what we found. Just looking at individual level knowledge and attitude, the shift is enormous. What people understood about the physiology and the psychology of trauma about themselves, huge. That is a really large effect. So it's a statistically significant improvement in understanding physiology, biology, and attachment. Beyond theory, what actually happened was people became more self-aware. They started to reflect on their own reactions. We were making people better bosses, better partners, better parents. The ripple effect was huge. So there was a real focus on self-care, on mindfulness. We had people who were responding back. When I gave them the 6-month post, there are 3 questions in there where I ask, has it impacted on you personally? Has it impacted on you within your job role? Has it impacted on what you're doing? And what came back again and again and again was that actually people were changing the way they were working, but they were understanding themselves and their own family. I had one lady who responded saying that she'd made up with her brother that she hadn't actually spoken to for 20 years because she understood the adverse childhood experiences differently. So where we've got responses of people changing their own lives, then we start to get the ripple effect through everything that they're doing, through every interaction. We had a heightened awareness of emotional regulation. We had a recognition of people understanding their own personal triggers, so what's actually setting them off in the first place. And we had this shift from reaction to reflection. I'm just asking people with 8 hours training to take that second to just go, oh, what could possibly be going on here? If we just take that second to shift our own reaction, the outcomes change. The unexpected benefits were massive. You can't support others if you don't understand yourself. That's the reality, isn't it? If we don't have a full battery pack, anybody who's been on my training knows I talk about batteries constantly. If we can't get that battery pack right up, How are we supposed to pour from an empty cup? We can't do it. So we need that training to act as an intervention for the workforce. We need people to understand vicarious trauma, to understand compassion fatigue, and what happens when all of this switches off. So the responses describe training as healing, empowering, supportive for personal and intergenerational trauma. So we're taking from process to person. Before, we had people with rigid processes, with assessing behaviour only with those strict sort of timelines. And then afterwards, we've got person-centred interventions. We've got people asking about the context, people actually looking beneath the behaviour and using that level of curiosity. That is absolutely what we need, that level of curiosity all of the time. What we saw were flexible timelines and safer environments. I've been so proud this afternoon because I've been going around and having a look in some of the rooms, and I'm hearing people talking about trauma-informed. I'm just looking at my navigators over there. I say my navigators, they're not my navigators, but you know what I mean. Actually, people taking the time to understand the needs of others. That's the key to it. So that behavioural shift. Practitioners describe moving away from rigid processes towards personalised interventions, focusing on asking about backgrounds, considering historical trauma, and approaches with empathy, patience, and understanding. Unlocking the trust, we need a mechanism. We need to understand the why behind the behaviour. This leads to empathy. We can teach empathy. It's actually quite easy to teach empathy. It's teaching compassion. That's the key. It's getting someone to use that empathy to do something with it, to change outcomes. The impact, deeper rapport, reduced hostility, reduced anxiety, and the outcome, an increased willingness for service users to seek help in both children and adults. And we've seen this over and over again. I've got another research paper, which fingers crossed is going to come out very soon, which should really, really back that up. The empathy engine. So responders reported being kinder, less judgmental, and more accommodating. And the key to it all was actually using this trauma-informed lens, was actually seeing behaviour underneath. So looking at what that aggression is telling you, what that withdrawal is telling you, why is that child being defiant? Why is that adult being defiant? What's behind that behaviour? Why are we getting a safety response? Where's the fear? That dysregulation, if we can always take that trauma-informed lens and put it over the top, we start to change our reactions. When we change our reactions, the outcomes change. There was a systemic shift, and I will be absolutely honest with you. I looked at personal, that was massive, that was absolutely huge. But the training had begun to change a shift in culture, in workplace culture. It's nowhere near enough, though. There is a shift, and it is positive. But actually, this is potentially where some of those gaps are forming. So when we actually look at the agents of change, I like to call them curiosity champions. There are some curiosity champions already in this room. We actually rolled out 6 curiosity champion conferences, and every single person who came on the Curiosity Champions conference got one of these babies, which has an entire assessment of how to look at, is your organisation trauma-informed, which looks at what's the language that we are using, because if everyone's using the same language, the outcomes change. So when we're advocating for others, sharing knowledge, influencing their workplaces and communities with these trauma-aware environments, we really have to be thinking about policy development, about supervision and training, about colleagues and peers, and making sure that we are making all of those people have their battery packs right up. If someone's dealing with something, they're feeling compassion fatigued, if they are then supported by colleagues who are being trauma-informed and bringing their battery back up again, we've got that person turning up to work the next day. The barrier. Why is the training not enough? The reality is that although knowledge soared and the systemic infrastructure was way too far behind, people who had been then trauma-informed were going back into organisations that weren't. So we see that really, really high score for the large effect for the individual knowledge, but it's really small when we're looking at systems and processes. Educators, people who work in public services, people who work in large organisations, they need that systemic change to happen. They need handbooks, they need onboarding, they need more of these. Because actually, all the work's out there, it's just giving that access to people so that they understand how to change systems. So, the TICCC, 5 minutes, the TICCC is about moving from being trauma aware to being trauma responsive. And this is my new role within the Merseyside Violence Reduction Partnership, is to take Merseyside through this systemic change. What we need for the sustainable change, we need leadership buy-in. We need everybody at every level, not just the people who come on the training. We need every part of the organisation trained together. When we go out, and we've trained 70 whole schools, I insist they bring everyone who's on the reception staff. I want everybody who's in the kitchen staff. I want the staff, the teachers. I want the learning assistants. I want the governors, all sat in the room, all trained together. Because then they can challenge each other when behaviour isn't trauma-informed. They can embed policies that change practice with everyone with the same level of understanding. We need staff well-being. That means meeting the needs of the staff who are now trained and understand the trauma that they're actually experiencing. But how do they do something with it? How do they change outcomes? And then that policy integration, where we change policy and practice, we start to get this systemic change. To sustain the ripples, the system must support the people, and that's the key. Those frontline staff are going out and dealing with everybody else's vicarious trauma. And if we're not supporting them, how do we expect them to have the battery pack full enough to actually do the job that we're asking them to do? So the transformation, first and foremost, we need to get the head, the heart and the hands in there. We need a knowledge shift. We need more people trained in this. 12,000 is not enough. Let's be realistic. 12,000 isn't even a drop in the ocean. To support the region, we need much more understanding. There needs to be an internal shift, so people actually change in practice because they understand things differently, and we need the practice shift where we're changing the policy and it's rippling in. We've seen a statistically significant increase in understanding of trauma biology. That personal healing, reduced judgment and increased self-awareness is key to it. And then the practice shift is the flexible, person-centred care, which is what we've been hearing about today. So we heard that from, certainly I heard it in the custody navigators. Keeping the ripples going. Trauma-informed practices can be transformative and have effects on individual self-awareness, relationship quality, personal service delivery and organisational culture. But we have to understand policy is how we shift the change and we make it long-term, not just a one and done. We cannot do one and done. And anybody tells you they're trauma-aware or they're trauma-informed or they're trauma-responsive, it is an ongoing journey. It has to be at every single level. Oh, right, I'm getting there. Support the system, support the staff, change the outcome. That's what we're after. To do that, I am calling all curiosity champions, and I'm asking everybody out there, I need to know what the systemic blind spots are, where the gaps are, where the holes are. So this next piece of research that we're working on, it's very much about finding those systemic blind spots, where systems are not able to be challenged back because maybe people aren't trauma aware. So I'm asking you, please take your QR code, please give it a look at. This survey that we've got out at the moment is to really look for the blind spots, whether you've been on the Trauma Informed Champions Conference or not. I want to know where trauma informed practice is falling down. If you've been on the training, it would be really helpful for you to actually do the survey. If you want to come on one of the Trauma Informed Champions conferences, we've got a whole new set that will be coming out later on in the year. You get all of the resources with your ticket as well, so please do come on. It's a full day's training. You'll have expertise from all over and more research that will be delivered in that too. And then lastly, if anybody wants to join us on on any social media whatsoever, please pass our details on. We will deliver trauma-informed training to every single organisation that comes knocking at the door. Unfortunately, it's not free anymore, but I promise you, 12,000 people who have been on our training, the change is coming and it's happening. And we can do it as a region. That's the most exciting part. We really have the potential to be seen across the world as leaders in this. Thank you very much, everybody. I'm going to put... Oh, no, I went the wrong way.
Thank you very much indeed.
Absolutely no problem.
Right. Just before I invite the next speaker, where is our next speaker? Please reveal yourself. Where's Judith? Oh, Judith, sorry. Thought we'd lost you there for a minute. Thanks ever so much, Jane, for the presentation. Invite you to come to the podium, please, now. Just in order to keep, hopefully, the track of time and so on, we have a evaluation form about today. So this will be passed around over the next few minutes by colleagues of mine. So I'd like you to multitask. I want you to listen to the speakers and engage with the speakers, but also if you can spend a wee bit of time just looking at the evaluation form as well. So I think we have about 20 minutes now. So Judith, you start, please, and then you can pass over to your colleagues. Thank you.
Can you hear me anyway? Yeah, okay, this one's on. Yeah, I'll pass it over. Hi everyone, I'm Judith Bairstow. I work for Liverpool City Council in the education and kind of social care fields, but I also facilitate Growing Stronger, which is Liverpool's response to ACEs. And I think we've been asked to have a think about what's going to make it having a really truly ACE and trauma-informed region. And I think there's a few things, and I think we'd all probably agree. Building on what Jane says, I think knowledge is really key, but what we really need to think about, I think, are three things. One is policy. Right from the top, we need our politicians to be on board with this. We need them to be setting the scene, handing out guidance and policy that means that it's something that we all need to do. And I think that would really help us work together as a region. I think there's a lot of good work going on, but I do think that would help. I think we need sustainable and sustained funding so that we can plan accordingly. If we've got funding where we know that we can train people, but we can also embed it across our systems, that's going to be really helpful to do it. And I also think we need to think about our communities and how is this being shared with our communities. Is there kind of I think some sort of communication package for the people who are living in our region to really understand what ACE and trauma-informed awareness is so that they can embed that for themselves and for each other as well. So I think we've made some steps along that journey and along the way, and I think I'm going to let Debbie talk about some of that because I'm sure she's got some of that to share, but I think those three elements to build on some of the work that is happening right across our region. Training is great, like Jane says, and it can change us and it can change our organisations. And there's a lot of really great training across our region that goes on. But how do we combine that together into a force of movement? And I think those three things will really help us do that.
Oh, yeah, thank you. It's like a relay race. Thank you. So I'm Debbie Blackburn. I'm the Director of Children's Conditioning, Nursing and Wellbeing at Salford City Council. But on top of my day job, I'm one of the exec leads for the Greater Manchester Trauma Responsive Movement with two of the exec leads, Helen Lowy, who's a consultant in public health, and Paul Wallace, who's Director of Psychological Services in MFT, Manchester Foundation Trust, sorry. abbreviating. So we've been on a journey since 2019, and it's as Judith said, you absolutely have to have that strategic level buy-in. So we went to the top essentially. So Andy Burnham signed off our approach and to become a trauma responsive city region by 2030, back in 2019, and system leaders are at that reform board and are bought into and committed to supporting this. We recognise it's a journey, not a destination. I've stolen that from the Scottish movement. But it absolutely is a journey, and it ebbs and flows, and it really is about that social movement, as well as the training, as well as the relentless commitment of loads of people in Greater Manchester. We were fortunate that we did get funding, and we've just been fortunate again that we've got ongoing funding for the next 3 years. And that absolutely helps, because when you need to pay for training for people, and when you need to secure buy-in, if I'm honest, to pay localities to innovate and share practice. We've also been able to fund VCSE organisations to support them to develop some of the resources that you're talking about, with the communities, and I think that's really positive. There's been a series of grant funding opportunities. We've got a co-production piece out at the moment, and so Dignify are delivering that for us at the moment, and we don't know what the product is because it's co-production. That's the whole point. So we're asking communities in Tameside and Wigan to work to really develop what it needs to look like. We've also got a prevalence study happening across Greater Manchester at the moment, so we'll know the results of that in January next year, but that will help us build the economic case around some of this, because I think that's what we need to be showing, and obviously Professor Mark Bellis talked this morning about the cost of trauma and ACEs, and absolutely we need to be making it front and centre in terms of policy, and also making the case for an invest to save, really, to say actually this will save money in the long run, and it will really help systems, communities, services to be trauma responsive but save money at the same time. And we're really looking at how we can do that, grow the social movement across Greater Manchester. So we're building implementation stories, and we've got our TRGM website that is trying to capture all of that, so that you can show in every bit of the system, in health, in education, in social care, in police, probation, VCSE organisations, what difference it makes. And there are just some really simple examples of where a GP practice has changed, introduce psychological safety into the practice, where even the reception staff doesn't ask you what's wrong with you as soon as you come to the reception to announce in front of the whole of the waiting room. But it's changed how they work with people with multiple disadvantage, and has changed DNAs, changed violence in the practice. So it's building those stories of what makes a difference in every bit of the system to then really help kind of shape how people react and respond. And we've tried to develop some language that's consistent around trauma responsive GM. So we had a language workshop, and Ellie's been supporting us with our evaluation for the last 6 years. So it's been really helpful to build the evidence base around some of this. And so we've created a slogan, and please feel free to feedback. We've not fixed it yet, but working together in every community, striving to better understand how our lived experiences can have an impact on how people feel and act. We'll use relationships and human connections to make sure people feel safe, heard, and that they belong. So that's the kind of strapline that we're trying to promote, and use community groups to take that forward to help, communicate what we're trying to achieve. It's basic, be kind kind of approaches. And then the only thing although I would mention, I'm not sure how long we've got, the only thing I would mention is that HR practices, again, are another area that absolutely needs to change. When I presented the fact that we wanted to introduce trauma-responsive approaches, I always said, well, so I still need to discipline people. It's like, well, you can, but you can just do it in a very different way. And yeah, exactly. So I'll pause there just in case there's any further questions.
Thank you very much indeed. We have about 10 minutes or so, so perhaps if we open this up to you guys with any questions or comments, that'd be much appreciated.
At the end of the day, I think Andrew's everyone's done.
Okay. In terms of what the three of you have just described very quickly, admittedly, what moving forward, 5 years, 10 years from now, what's going to have the biggest impact in that kind of journey, in ensuring that is actually a positive one that has, the benefits for all of us in our respective cities and so on?
That's all right. I was just going to say, so last Friday I was actually in Manchester delivering on a panel very similar, and it absolutely, we have to push for this to be statutory. We have to push for this to be just at the same level as safeguarding, because if we don't see trauma-informed practice as just as important, or ACEs, on that level of understanding, if we do not see it as statutory, we do not change policies, practices across the board. Safeguarding takes that level of expectation that people will understand behaviour. And if we don't put trauma up there, then outcomes just don't change.
I think we are heading in the right direction with some of that, Jane. I think there's some publications from the DFE quite recently have come out with guidance around belonging and mattering and making those key and kind of statutory elements around education. And I think we can utilise some of that guidance to help us form that kind of trauma responsive approach. I do think that shared language is really important, because what we're saying, what that kind of definition that you shared is pretty much what we're all aiming for. So if we could adopt some sort of shared language about what we want and what we all expect together to come through, we can embed that in different ways, and every system and maybe every LCR, every city region or every LA is going to do it slightly differently. But if we can agree that we're working towards something similar, I think in 5-10 years we could really be somewhere with our trauma responsive region. But I do think it's definitely, let's get it embedded in the policy, let's get it in the practices, because that's what's going to really make that difference.
I would say also in communities, because I think if people understand this and recognise the impact of ACEs on children and are able to kind of hold each other to support, not to account necessarily, but to support, I think that would make a massive difference. And it's really interesting because Northern Ireland have it as a safeguarding policy, don't they? Scotland have it as an NHS policy, Wales have it as a public health policy. And actually, we need one for England, and there has just recently been an all-party parliamentary group that was lobbying to do some of that. But it will be interesting to see how that kind of plays out. But I honestly generally think if communities understood this and recognised it, I think they would make the change, and it would have a massive influence.
Yeah, no, I think that's right. And I think that goes back to the idea about the kind of communication strategies around some of it to make sure that it does come from the grassroots. And it's great we're doing all that co-production, but I do think it maybe needs to be a little bit wider. But another thing that I think will make a difference, where's Nadia still here? I don't know, but when she was talking before about, I've never seen data like that looks at when they had that support, the difference it made, how it reduced the risk. I've not seen that. And I think that's really key, because actually it's a message of hope, isn't it? And sometimes it can feel quite despairing when you read this message, but actually, you know what, if you get support and the support's available, what difference that's going to make.
Sorry. I'll take 2 microphones, I don't mind. I was just going to say, we currently have 77 parent trainers who are delivering free trauma-informed parenting courses across Merseyside. In Sefton, we've got 47 alone. And I do think without the wraparound support of it being community-based interventions as well as trauma-informed practice for practitioners, we don't call it trauma-informed training because we don't want to traumatise parents saying you've given your kids trauma, but actually that compassionate parenting is how we get out to communities as well. We need the wraparound in every organisation, and whether that's schools, whether it's social care. We've got 2 navigators who are both parent trainers who actually are delivering it through all the interventions that they're doing at the same time. It's got to be on all levels. We have to be across the board, which is why we really, really have to commit as local authorities to being a trauma-responsive region.
I would just mention as well, there is also a trauma responsive north. We got a bit fed up of waiting for policy to change nationally, so we formed a coalition across the north that was mainly led by West Yorkshire. So there's a concordat that's been produced that we're hoping to circulate across the whole of the northwest to say, actually, let's get organisations signed up to it and get some consistency and make sure that actually from the exec level down and across all organisations that we've got that commitment to do some of that. And I think one of the questions then that comes back is how. So we need to work collectively, I really think, to make sure that we're doing that consistently.
I think that's about the sustained and sustainable funding as well, isn't it? So we can make these agreements, we can commit to it in policy, but if the policy sits on the shelf, it's useless. So if we've got the sustained funding, we can really plan to move it forwards.
Any comments or questions from
Debbie wants to ask a question.
Debbie?
We've spoken a lot about informed policy and changing the way we work. Where can this be embedded into curriculum in universities, in colleges and in schools, so children and young people can understand themselves and professionals know about it before they go to the workplace? So it doesn't matter where they work, because policy doesn't change things for people. People change things for people.
I think we've all got a response to that, actually. We're all like, well, actually, because I think that's really important, isn't it? So I know the Growing Stronger work has developed a system of PHSE lessons for all schools that's free to access from the website, and I think there is an appetite out there for schools to be doing this. Children want to learn about it. When you teach them, they say, "Oh, this makes me a better friend. This has helped me understand people a little bit more. Oh, I get now. It makes me understand myself." So I think that's probably across the board. Actually, I think that's happening, and maybe we don't know. Maybe there's not enough communication around to say, actually, this is happening, because obviously Growing Stronger is only one element, but I think it's happening across the region. So how can we communicate that better?
Definitely, and I would say that we've been trying to embed it into university pre-reg training, so into teacher training, into nurse, into social care, into and actually it's quite difficult to get things on curriculum in universities, but we are trying in Greater Manchester, and I think it's definitely something that we absolutely need to do and get into PSHE. We're just developing something in Salford around that, and working around positive masculinity and trying to reduce domestic abuse. So I think it's something we could really connect on, and that's the opportunity for how we become truly trauma responsive city regions. It's across the whole country, sharing good practice.
I think they pretty much covered everything I was going to say, so it's fine. Sarah?
So I'll take the one there.
Yeah, so hi, I'm a psychologist. I've got a director role for vulnerable families. And I think for me, with trauma-informed care, I do a lot of training on trauma-informed care. I think we need to have a deeper dive into the training in terms of the lens on attachment and separation loss, because I've done tons of work with cared for children, parents who are cared for, staff, multi-agency professionals. I think what people don't realise is the greatest trauma that anyone suffers is separation loss. And the work I do is knitted into the families first for children reforms. And I think we really need to focus that trauma-informed care lens on keeping families together, keeping children with families, because the children care research data shows us that they have the poorest outcomes, and not because of early trauma, because of multiple separation and loss. And I know trauma is massive, but I think we don't put a lens enough on the damage of separation and loss with families.
And I would reiterate on that we don't understand the impact when we move children on again and again and again, when we exclude, when we suspend, when we don't actually meet the need of the child, just push them away. That then exacerbates everything tenfold. And until we actually start training people the impact of attachment, we don't change outcomes. So it absolutely has to be fundamental in what we are training, especially to our teacher trainees, to our social work trainees, to our police cadets. Everybody needs to understand this on the same level.
I'm not minimising vulnerability or ACE.
No.
And obviously we don't want that, but I think what people don't realise is the impact of continuous separational loss.
Yeah.
And that the trauma that is, as a psychologist, I see it later on with parents, with working in mental health services, the most worrying attachment patterns are those, not that have had significant trauma, but significant separational loss.
Yeah.
That is the greatest trauma.
I would also add about the parents and we see high rates of suicide in parents who've had children removed. So across the spectrum, we have to put that lens on it. So I really agree.
Thank you. Comment on that before somebody else. Yeah, please.
It's been a fantastic day, and it's like proper exceeded my expectations coming today, and I've learned quite a lot. One of the key things that stood out for me is I work with 18 to 21 care leavers, and I want to ask I can see a gap, and a significant gap, in particularly when I get allocated to co-work with a social worker at 16, when a young person's neat, and sort of, although there's a lot of talk around educating in education, what about that pocket of people that are not in education and they become then the next trauma and like the lady said behind me, that separation. I'm 21, I've got young people saying, I can't leave you and I don't want to leave you, and as much as I don't want them to leave me. My role is to obviously get them to be an adult, to be independent, but it's really stood out for me today, and something I'm going to take back to my team, that there is that gap, that significant gap in, we can be educated, but what about the kids and the violence and the drug criminology when they're not in school or they're not in education? What are we doing about that?
Absolutely. I don't know if you saw the piece of the report that came out very recently about the impact of some of the interventions in Sefton, where they've looked specifically at NEAT, and they've had a really big impact because they're supporting people in a totally different way. And we need more of that. We need it across the board. We cannot forget the impact of not in education, employment and training, because those children don't have, or young adults, if anybody's done my training, your brain doesn't fully develop till you're at least 25 or 32 if you look at the latest research. But actually, if we are not supporting those people, it has to be on every level. We've got to look at old people's care as well. We have to look at care across the board, because that's the only way we're going to have an impact socially. With a public health approach, it's looking at every single level and very, very early years, because then we can start to make change really quickly. So, yeah.
Zara wanted to say something at the back.
Yes, Zara?
Just one comment reflecting on Debbie's point around training the future workforce. So we as a university, there's about 50 of us that have been on the Trauma-Informed Champions training. And that, along with our research and our role in the institute, we've actually got support from our leadership team to become a trauma-informed and responsive institution. So that means two things. We'll change all our policies, we'll change a lot of things that we do to work and support our students better. But it also means in our education programmes, so we have, policing, public health, social care, education, and so on and so forth. Probably most of the professions in this room being trained, at least in our university and in others. So going forward, that's something we hope as a university to influence. So, we don't have to, no offence, Jane, I don't want to put you out of a job, but, we don't have to wait till people are in the workforce. Actually, they're going into that workforce with at least some knowledge and some awareness and some understanding. So we do already teach on trauma informs on many of our programmes, but it's just because we think it's the right thing to do. What we need to do is, as you say, embed it in our curriculum. And so it's not just about the local universities, but actually national curriculum as well.
I know universities are quite competitive, so I'm going to mention that when I go back.
I must say as well in Salford, Salford University, I believe, is a very different university, actually designed a building following a trauma-informed approach. And we also need to think about that. It's not just how we work, but it's what look at this building, it's absolutely fantastic. I'm sure we don't all work in a building such as this. So it's about our spaces and our environment as well as how we work.
I'd be interested to know more about that, but that's possibly for another question. I think, am I right? Zara, that we now to wrap this bit up, and what happens next?
We'll thank our panel.
Fabulous, thank you. Afternoon everyone. So I'm Matt, I'm the Director of Public Health for Liverpool, and I'm also the Violence Prevention Lead Director of Public Health for Merseyside. So fantastic. As we reach the end of today's conference, just want to thank every single speaker, attendee, community voice who's contributed to such an inspiring and energising day. What a good conference, and today has been a clear reminder, I think, of something really important. Merseyside's not waiting for change, and nor should we. We are actually making it happen, and thank goodness for that. So this morning, Professor Zara Quigg and Emily Spurrell set the tone. Violence prevention works when we take a public health approach, when we understand the causes early, when we act, and when we stay focused on that long-term change. And then Professor Mark Bellis showed us the lifelong impact of adverse childhood experiences, including the huge cost of failing to intervene. And his message was really blunt and true. Prevention costs less than inaction in every single sense. I think across all sessions, one theme came through loud and clear. Violence is a public health issue, and public health issues need whole system solutions. So if we want to prevent harm, we must tackle the conditions that drive it: poverty, trauma, inequality, poor mental health, lack of opportunity, social isolation. And alongside that, we must also strengthen the protective factors already alive in our communities. So things like safe spaces, early support, strong family networks, better mental health, reduced inequality, greater opportunities for all, and stronger community connection. And it also means partnership, true partnership. No single organisation can do this alone. We know this, but together, whether that's across health, education, policing, local governments and the voluntary sector, we can and will create the conditions where violence is far less likely to occur. Our parallel sessions showed just how much is already happening. Early intervention, family support, safe schools, neurodiversity, CAPVA, youth-led prevention, custody navigators, deferred prosecution, positive pathways. Message was really simple there, I think. We're not starting from scratch. There is already some amazing work happening in Merseyside and across the wider region. We are building on solid ground. And then I think some of the most powerful moments today came from our children and young people. Their performance, their insights, their leadership reminded us that they're not just part of the conversation. They are the conversation. They are shaping that conversation. And if we want a safer Merseyside for all, then their voices must stay right at the centre. And our final plenary focused on becoming a truly ACE-aware, trauma-informed and trauma-responsive region. And that's not just a slogan. Hopefully it's a commitment to compassion, to designing services that don't re-traumatise people, that support staff as well as communities, and that actually embed that trauma-informed practice across every single system. It's long-term work. It was really interesting to hear the reflections about pockets of our communities that perhaps are not yet touched by that work and need to be. It's long-term work, but it's really essential if we want to break that cycle of harm. So, what does today tell us about the road ahead? Well, we think we are already seeing the impact of that public health approach. We're seeing stronger collaboration, we're seeing much smarter use of our data, we're seeing a growing commitment to evidence-based practice. And that's fantastic. Those shifts may not always grab the headlines, but they do change lives, especially for the children, for the young people, and for the families who need it most. But we're not done yet, are we? Far from it. Working with our communities has shown us how powerful that co-production piece can be. When people help shape the answers, violence can be prevented, and we want to build on that. We want to listen more. We want to make sure we've got better decision sharing, and we want to make sure that every community actually has a real voice and feels like they've got a voice in that conversation. So we must keep strengthening that collaboration. We must keep investing in early intervention, keep embedding trauma-responsive practice, and keep turning evidence into action. Our new 10-year Merseyside violence prevention strategy gives us the roadmap. Today has shown that Merseyside is not only committed to this vision, but we're leading it. So thank you. Thank you to all our speakers, our chairs, our partners, our young people, community organisations, the Merseyside Violence Reduction Partnership and the LJMU Public Health Institute, our conference organisers. And thank you to all of you for your passion, your commitment, and your belief that change is possible. The wonderful thing, I think, is that we know we can make change happen, and partnership working continues to grow across our region. So as I close today, I'd like to leave you with one final example, a truly collaborative programme bringing together education, statutory services and the families of victims of serious violence. So launching this September in schools and community settings across Merseyside, Dear Merseyside reflects the power of collective action to create safer futures, and hopefully the film will follow. Thank you.
Dear Merseyside, I hope this letter finds you well. I'm writing to you to see how you are. It's been so long we haven't been in touch as much as we should. My name is Joseph Roberts and I'm a poet from Liverpool. What you're watching is Dear Merseyside, a creative poetry project developed in partnership with Human to Liverpool, the Merseyside Violence Reduction Partnership and Merseyside Police. The footage you can see comes from a new resource that will be shared with young people in schools, youth organisations and community settings across our region. At its heart, Dear Merseyside is an invitation for young people to reflect on the places they call home. Through poetry, discussion and creative activities, the resources encourages them to explore what they love about their communities, what challenges they see around them, and what role they can play in creating positive change. The project was created to help young people find their voice, share their experiences, and recognise the value they bring to communities they are part of. We know that serious violence can have a lasting impact on individuals, families, and neighbourhoods. That's why it's so important that young people have opportunities to express themselves, build positive connections, and imagine a better future for places where they live. At the centre of the resource is a spoken word poem, a love letter to Merseyside, a celebration of our people, our resilience, and the communities that shape us. But Dear Merseyside is more than a poem. It's a chance for young people to create their own letters to places they call home, to celebrate what makes those places special, to challenge what they'd like to see improved, and to consider how their ideas, actions and voices can help shape the future. Because creating safer, stronger communities isn't something that happens through one organisation alone. It happens when people feel connected, heard and empowered to make a difference. As you watch this preview, you're seeing the beginning of that journey, a resource designed to inspire conversation, creativity and pride in our region. And a simple question for every young person who takes part: if you were writing a letter to Merseyside, what would you say? I've been wondering about what has gotten into us, because in 2022 I saw you on the news for all the wrong reasons. I've been meaning to ask you, how are the kids? Because the last time we spoke you said the kids were joining gangs and we'd be making a difference with strategies and plans. It appeared that things were once worse. Wars over turf, reports of concerns, pockets of communities destroyed undeserved. Sound of sirens in the morning, earlier than the birds, blades and blazes, lots to search. What on earth? walking through metal detectors before walking into school? What have we learned in this pool of life that we're living in? It's easy to sink in instead of swim. You gotta deal these drugs, are you out or you in? Pedaling upstream, trying to keep in with the click. Have you noticed that every kid looks the same? Same coat, same trainers, thinking with the same brain. All of them walking the same, talking the same. Too afraid to be themselves and swim in their own lane. Cause it's easier to go along with the current than to go against it. So how do we change it? Well, it starts with us. Instead of joining gangs, how about joining after school clubs, youth clubs? We need more opportunities for you to try new stuff. Merseyside, pass this on and let them know. Let your kids know this isn't the way to go. Imagine your mum sitting on the stairs, rollers in her hair, head in her hands, waiting for you to come home while you're out getting chased for the same old crime after crime. It takes 4 minutes to die from a stab wound, so I hope this letter reaches you in time. I hope this letter can be the pressure to stop the bleed, and I hope this letter can be the reason to stay alive. Cause you've got a future to live, you've got a gift inside. If only we could just rewind and save you just in time before you got caught in the county lines. When I was writing this letter, I had to write both sides, pen overflowing as I was speaking my mind. We have to change what's current for you and other young lives. I'm not the postman, I'm the poet, man. Even though I deliver messages for a living, I'm going as fast as I can, man. I might be late getting back to you, I hope you can understand, man. I've got to get through to a lot of people, through a lot of doors of a lot of homes. Expected to do this all on my own. How I'm gonna do it, I'll never know. But it starts with us opening up this envelope and adding our drop of impact to the river of hope. Merseyside, I love you so much, we'll have to have a catch up soon. I want to talk about solutions, ways to improve. Let's talk about education, let's talk about school culture strong, harmony like a song. In order to evolve, we've got to get involved by working together to resolve what's wrong. Pave way, make change, stay so it's strong, and create a safe place for all of us to belong. And so it starts with one house and we work our way along. Living in silence, not an option from now on. Evolving areas doesn't happen with a wand. Clear, hold, build is the strategy we're on. You gotta love where you live, we've gotta live where there's love. About time that we're proud of the place we've grew up. There's so much in the city, we just really have to look. The trials and tribulations, all the things we've overcome, I'm done. Cause I'm sick of seeing flowers on the floor, murals on the walls, of kids who should be here but are no longer here anymore. Just get back to me when you can, cause this can't go on. And if we work together, things will get better, I promise. Yours sincerely, Joseph Roberts.
Fabulous. In case we needed a reminder of why we do this stuff and why we're here today. Thank you so much, everybody, for being here. I hope you've enjoyed the conference. Please do fill out your evaluation forms. That would be really helpful for us. But otherwise, have a safe trip home. Thank you.